Evolutionary.org, episode 619 is coming your way. Today we're going to talk about Semaglutide Ozempic. We're going to do a little bit of an introduction here, quick 30-minute podcast. We're trying to give you as much information as possible, so let's get right into it first. So the history behind GLP-1 hormone started in the 1970s. Two scientists were researching them, and it was related to ulcer disease. And they were examining hormones secreted during eating, and they were testing them on pig pancreases. And then that's how they discovered the GLP-1's significant potency. That came in the late 1980s. And their work later contributed significantly to diabetes and obesity treatments. And they actually won some prizes and awards for that. In the early 90s, another scientist managed to infuse GLP-1 into people with type 2 diabetes, which stimulated insulin while inhibiting glucagon. And it brought their blood glucose to normal levels. But the problem was with the GLP-1 hormones was the side effects were really really pronounced in diabetics, which made it kind of counterproductive in the first place. So they started to come up with ways to develop suitable compounds to be actually used for therapeutic uses that were actually in that favor. So, one of the ones that Novo Nordisk came up with was the brand name Ozempic, which is the semaglutide. And look, at the end of the day, it is a peptide, and it's similar to the glucagon-like peptide GLP-1, and it's modified with a side chain. So it can be administered sub-Q, or it can be taken orally. And another brand name for it is called Wegovy. And if you talk to any pharmacist that you know, they'll probably bring it up. They're like, oh yeah, we get this person's asking about Wegovy. This person's asking about Ozempic. Another one too, less known in the United States, name is Ribelsus, and that's another one that has as well. So at the end of the day, in the United States, it was approved for medical use in 2017, and by 2022. It's in the top 50 most commonly prescribed medication in the United States. And there's over 13 million prescriptions and growing for it. So it's
Wow.
become something that a lot of people are using to help with weight loss. And
Yeah.
it's considered really one of the first big weight loss drugs
Yes.
that are actually approved by prescription. And we've seen several come since that are still not, like Rita, for example,
No. No.
Ritatride. That's another one too. So, and in this podcast, we're going to kind of get into it. Mobster?
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm just thinking of one of those fat loss drugs that you mentioned. I think actually probably before this one. Do you remember the one? And I can't think of the name of it, Steve. But one of the side effects was oily shits. So, and literally the oily shit was the fat coming out from your diet into your stools, into your poo. And people suddenly realized that perhaps this wonder drug that actually did the job that it said it did on the tin just wasn't worth the effort. So listen, these kind of drugs take a long time to come to the marketplace. I'm not a huge fan of them, but even I recognize I've literally seen memes on this, Steve. I'm Pacific with people who've got loose skin or whatever else. When it's become a cartoon, when it's mentioned in The Simpsons or American Dad or whatever, you realize it's in the public consciousness. When Steve stated the number of prescriptions earlier on, that is a serious number. That's big money, Steve. I mean, and let me hammer up one particular point right now, okay? Because when we talk about these kind of products, when we talk about these kind of drugs, the key phrase, and I'm literally looking at an article, it says, which can aid, this is the key word, in weight loss. And there's an argument to be made for us always looking for the magic pill, the magic tablet, the magic cure, the magic fix, the 5 minute workout that doesn't make you ache and sweat or whatever else, but still makes you look like Mr. Olympia. So look, type 2 diabetes is incredibly common in the US, or symptoms of type 2 diabetes, incredibly common in the US and incredibly common in the UK. And in the great and vast majority of cases, not all cases, I need to emphasize that point, the great and vast majority of cases can be fixed and we'll see fantastic improvement if you improve your diet. So no sitting there on the sofa eating Cheetos and hoping for the best. And if you include your physical activity, and I mean, I don't even mean going to the gym, Steve. I mean getting off your ass and going for a walk or riding the bike around the park. And then using something like this product, this is just for the average Joe, will give you fantastic results. And that's why it's become popular. I'd argue, Steve, it's going to become even more popular in the future. The focus of these shows is people that work out. The focus of these shows are people that are already invested and interested in their health. So we're not just going to touch upon Mr. and Mrs. Joe Smith sitting on their sofa in their American home or their British home or wherever, who need to exercise more, need to eat better. We're going to talk about also people that already are kind of eating clean, are focused on the bodybuilding diet, are focused on the bodybuilding lifestyle. And have we seen an increase in semaglutide being used by people like that? Absolutely. Come onto the forums and check it out. I'm
Yeah.
a dumbass when it comes to this, and I'm still seeing people using it and getting great results.
And I mentioned, you know, retatride, and then there's also terzepatide, which is Zepbound, and that's another one that a lot of people are using as well. So we've seen improvements when it comes to these semaglutide, but at the end of the day, a lot of people are really having success with the semaglutide. And then the ribellicis, as I mentioned, is the oral version of semaglutide. So a lot of people want to use the oral versus the injectable. So there's two options for that. And they even mention this, these drug companies, they say it should be an adjunct to diet and exercise when you're using semaglutide. So in other words, it's a supplement that you should be using. So semaglutide helps you, a lot of you out there who have habitual eating problems or who have addictions to foods or you use food um, to kind of drown your pain. Some people use alcohol to drown their pain, some people use drugs to drown their pain, but a lot of people have developed the issue of drowning their pain in food. I've heard so many stories over the years, Mobster, especially with women, but some men as well, where women will go through a tough time in their life and they'll eat themselves. They'll eat ice cream and all this stuff. So a lot of you have developed these bad habits where you're not happy with your life. You come home from work, you eat the ice cream, you eat the junk food, you eat the pizza, you go out to the bars, whatever. So semaglutide can help you get back on track because it's going to basically kill your appetite. Mobster mentioned a couple of the side effects. Let's go over the actual official side effects that come with semaglutide before we get into the fun stuff of how to use it and how to take it.
Yeah.
So look, the most common side effects are going to be nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain, and constipation. And look, that comes with the territory. You're taking something that's literally the whole point, is that you're going to be so nauseous where you start eating food and after a couple bites, you put your fork down and you're like, I'm
Yeah.
full. If I eat
Yeah.
anymore, I'm going to get sick. And
Yes.
that's kind of the idea behind it. It's almost like you kind of lose control over your satiated feelings, and that's kind of the idea where you're going to be eating much smaller portions. As a kid growing up, Mobster, I get slapped for not finishing my dinner. But in this case, a lot of you out there who are trying to lose weight and you're listening to this
I've been
podcast,
there,
that's
Steve.
what you got to
I'm
do.
at the table with you, brother. I got told off.
Yeah. So in this
They
case,
didn't have a lot of money. You got to eat your food.
So yeah, in this case, that's what the idea is. So you're gonna feel so
Yeah.
nauseous, that you're not gonna be able to eat a big meal. You're not gonna be able to eat 5 meals a day, 4 meals a day.
There's an
So
actual medical condition, Steve, called Prader-Willis, where the people that suffer from that don't have a stop button when it comes to eating, and you literally have to physically take the food away from them or not let them have access to food. And the problem is, like Steve said, and I'll just echo what Steve said. Listen, I've rewarded myself with food. Women breakups hitting the bars of chocolate. I've said if I do this thing, I can have that type of Ben and Jerry's. I can have that type of Haagen-Dazs. But I weigh 300 pounds and I work out like a motherfucker. So arguably, if I wasn't training, Stephen, I ate the way that I eat, I'd be massively obese. Right? And one of the issues is, and I said this jokingly earlier on, I think on another show as well as this one, people sitting on their sofas watching TV and they can't do it without a snack. You cannot do it without a bag of chips or Cheerios or something there. Or even one of the British ones, Steve, is to have a bowl of cereal as a snack in the night time. So what you're meant to be having for breakfast, you're now having honey nut pops or something in the night time. And it's not just stuff that the snacks we see in the supermarkets that you have in your car. You're not hungry, motherfucker. You're getting 3,000 calories a day from 3 solid meals.
Yeah.
You don't need a snack. Even on the
It's
forums, you see people saying a snack. Just eat more in your meal, and you
And
won't need a
CNN
snack.
had a great video on this, and where people would sit in front of their TV and they'd more likely to snack because it's you're getting that dopamine rush, you're getting the pleasure, it's pleasure eating. Like one of the things I love to do, Mobster, is like we go to the movie theater. What do people do? They go to the snack section, in the movie
Oh,
theater,
please, I've done it.
get their
Yeah,
snack, they sit down, they enjoy the
popcorn
movie,
or
and they
whatever.
munch on their popcorn or munch on their candy or munch on
Steve,
their
we've even had a TV show here in the UK, and don't ask me what it's called. I've forgotten. Where they are there's a camera on the TV watching a show, and then they are interviewed by a crew at a separate time or at the same time remotely as to what they thought about the show. And I haven't watched this for years. I don't watch TV that much, and 9 times out of 10, there's some sort of soda and or a snack on the table just to make themselves look sociable.
yeah.
Yeah, let's
So
move on from that. Yeah,
Yeah, so let's talk about how it works. This way, before you start taking something, you got to know how it works. So I talked about GLP-1 earlier. It works by mimicking the effects of the GLP-1, what those scientists were found back in the 70s and 80s. And again, it's a hormone that helps lower blood sugar by increasing insulin release and reducing the amount of glucose your liver produces. So that's the way it's working in your system. Now, additionally, what we just talked about, the way you feel satiated quicker on semaglutide is that it's going to slow down the emptying of your stomach by mimicking that GLP-1. So you're going to feel fuller for longer and reduce hunger. So that's going to aid with weight loss. So I'm curious, Mobster. I'm going to be doing a fast pretty soon. I'm actually going to be using one of these GLP-1 mimickers. It may be semaglutide, but it might also be retatrutide. That's another one. And I'm going to be actually fasting during it. And I want to see, does it, the first 3 days of a fast is when that's the hardest part if you're doing a prolonged fast, because once you get past the 3 days, your appetite's gone. So I'm curious about using it for the first 3 days and then seeing how much it helps in those first 3 days get through that tough period of the first 3 days. So that's going to be interesting to kind of experiment with it. So keep an eye on that on a future log of mine to see
yeah,
what kind of effects it has. So look, if you're using the peptide version, you're going to need to get your semaglutide vial. You're also going to need, it's going to come in a non-reconstituted form, obviously, because you have to reconstitute it. And then you're going to have to reconstitute it with your back water. And you're going to have to get your insulin syringes. So you're basically going to inject it. You don't have to spot inject it anywhere in your stomach or anything, but a lot of people like to inject it into your stomach. It's just
yes,
easier that way. It's not going to make your
yes.
stomach go away by injecting it into your
No, no,
stomach.
it's not site effective.
No,
It's
no. So it's
body
just like
effective.
any peptide, just the easiest spot. So you grab your stomach fat and just inject it in there. Now, one of the things that's under debate right now, and a lot of people are
Yes.
playing with it in the bodybuilding world, is how often to inject it. So, and how often to use it. So, really, at the end of the day, um, you want to basically. So, look, at the end of the day, you want to start at a low amount. And a lot of times people are going to start at a 1/4 milligram per week to start. Now, we've
Yeah.
heard from bodybuilders on the forum, some of the big time bodybuilders who are using this stuff to help them with their appetite.
Compete. Yep. Get in
And
shape.
they're actually taking it daily, and they'll take a
Yep.
much smaller amount daily. So that's really up to debate. And at the end of the day, what you want to do the first 4 weeks is you want to start with that small dose, and then you may want to increase it from there. So really, that's kind of where you want to start. Give it a good 4 week trial, see where you're at, see where your side effects are at, see if it's kind of a situation where you could start increasing your dose. So at the end of the day, it makes sense for a lot of bodybuilders to be taking it more often than once a week,
Yes.
but in a more tiny amount. Maybe it gives you more flexibility and it gives you more control over the situation.
Yeah.
I've heard people going up, mobster, to 1 gram, 2 grams, 3 grams of this stuff. And you want to be careful about running too much. At the end of the day, as long as it's doing what what we're
Yes.
intending it to do, which
Yes.
is
Yes. Yes. Yes.
reducing your hunger and increasing your, feeling
Let me
satiated
touch on
after.
that just for a second. As I just said to Steve off air, as to look, what we've seen over the years is that certain athletes, not bodybuilders, have come around to the bodybuilding way of thinking in terms of nutrition, for example, and then later on hormonal manipulation vis-a-vis steroids and other performance enhancement drugs, because they realize arguably we kind of experiment. The ability, as Steve said, to adjust on the fly, and obviously the side effects, etc. we've been we've been a bit daft at times, but over the years you would end up working towards useful protocols like the kind that Steve and I discuss on multiple shows, the way that it works, etc. And look, any person that we're referring to when we talk about what we've seen on the forums is looking to get into shape. Their diet should be on point. Their training should be on point. They're different from average Joes. Their insulin levels should be under control. They're more likely to manipulate hormones and variables and so on and so forth. And at that point, you start to learn what's more effective. I think the average Joe out in the street, Steve, just doesn't want to pin every goddamn day. But bodybuilders, because of what we do, we're more used to
Yeah,
pinning.
that's a good point for sure. So at the end of
But
the day,
talk
what
about
happens?
stacking there as well,
So
Steve. How
from
do we stack the
yes,
exercise?
so let me just say this as well. The longer you use it, the more you'll kind of get used to its effects. So, as you kind of play around with it, you want to stick to the first 4 weeks, give it an honest 4 weeks. And then if you feel it's kind of weaning off of its effects, you can start increasing. Because as you lose weight, obviously it's going to require you to bump up the dose more. It's just like anything else in life. It's just like a bodybuilder who's trying to get down to 4 or 5% body fat. As you start dropping from 10, 12 to 11 to 10, 9, it's going to get harder and harder and harder to lose that excess of fat. So by increasing the dose, you're kind of, forcing your body, you're kind of forcing the effect to kind of happen, but you don't want to run it.
That would be the one sort of red flag for me, Steve. That as you mentioned, some of the higher numbers earlier on, I would my tendency when we do these shows is to not go crazy with any peptide, with any hormone, with any steroid or
Yeah, so
whatever
this
else.
is why I recommend no more than a 10% increase per week. So if you
Yes,
started out at if you're at 1 milligram, then only move it up 10% to 1.1 milligram and so
yeah.
on. If you're at half a milligram, only move it up by zero point 0.5,
There's always going
so
to be a very small
0.05.
percentage of individuals that push the envelope, and a very small percentage of individuals require more than most. But that is a fraction, and a lot of the people like that are already genetically different, or genetic abnormalities, or freaks, or whatever you want to call them. So again, it's what works for most people, what works for 90 or 95% of our audience, what is effective, and of course, understanding some of the other parameters that we discussed earlier on as well.
Even the
So
most experienced people won't push more than 1.5 milligrams a week of this
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
So
yeah,
these
yeah.
dosing that I see online of 2, 3 milligrams is insane. Only reason you should ever do that is if you're really obese, 350, 400 pounds, and you're working with a doctor at the same time. But if you're listening to this and you're 350 pounds, you need to be working with a doctor. You need to be working with a doctor who's going to have you use this stuff safely, and you'll be able to find a doctor these days who's going to be able to prescribe this for you and help track you. So, really, this isn't something to play around with because the side effects are definitely there. You don't want to really cause more problems than you're getting. So let's talk about stacking. And look, at the end of the day, semaglutide. Okay, we got that. We got it in there. It's locked in. We're going to be using that. We're going to start. at a 1/4 milligram a week. You could split the dosage into 2 to 3 dosing a week, or you could split it up and take it every other day or every day, as long as it adds up to a 1/4 milligram. So with that set for the first 4 weeks, what do we stack with it? So there's a couple different options. One of the options that really makes sense would be you want to really get your diet on point and you really want to hit your cardio. So to take advantage of this stuff, you don't want to just take it and sit in your ass eating potato chips. So I think GW 501, 516 cardamom makes a lot of sense here because GW, it's not a stimulant. It won't mess around with your appetite. It won't cause any issues. The side effects are extremely low on it, and it will boost your cardio, and it will also boost your fat loss alongside the semaglutide without interfering with it. So the way GW works, it's a PPAR agonist, and it's going to kind of change the way your body uses energy, but it's also going to boost your endurance a lot. So it'd be a great option to use daily. So you take 10 to 30 milligrams of the GW every day. You only have to take it once a day, and it's an oral, so it's not something you have to inject. So I think that would be a beautiful add-on. SARMs in general, selective androgen receptor modulators. There's different SARMs you can use. Ostarine could be a good option to add here. It's a very mild SARM, anywhere from 25 to 50 milligrams a day, and that will be really nice if you like to, bodybuild and weight train. That would be a good option as well. So if you want to go the SARMs route, that would be a good option. LGD is another one. RAD 140 is another one. Those would be good SARMs as well to stack alongside. But in either situation, I would add the GW for sure, as your base if you're going to add SARMs to this. Another option that some people like to use with semaglutide who are bodybuilders is growth hormone. So in growth hormone's case, you want to just go a really low dose because if you use too much growth hormone,
Yep.
it's going to increase your appetite. So I would not do that much. I would stick to a low dose of growth hormone, no more than 1 or 1.5 IU's per day. And you can
Yep.
take it right before you eat your first meal of the day. And growth hormone is a good way for you to use something that's anti-aging that can help with fat loss as well. And especially if you're going to commit to using semaglutide for several months, it might be a good idea to use the growth hormone alongside it for 3, 4 months. And using them together would be good synergy when it comes to your workouts and stuff like that. So that's just food for thought. Different things to work
I
out.
was thinking, Steve, one of my favorites is, MK677 Nutribol for much the same reason as Steve's just recommended growth hormone. And again, purely and simply because it's boosting the growth hormone production in your body rather than you taking it from outside. What I would avoid, like the plague, insulin for fairly obvious reasons, because you're talking about having the body produce the right amount of insulin, taking semaglutide versus taking insulin from outside. And of course, bodybuilders that do that tend to
The
eat
only
more
problem I
food as well.
have with Nutribol is the appetite increase. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
almost
Again, that's a timing
counterproductive.
issue, I think, Steve. I mean, I take it in the morning and I don't get that anymore, but lots of people do. So
Yeah.
you're right.
So
So,
maybe a
for example,
small
the
amount
night
before
time,
bed would be the
yes,
way to do
exactly.
it. And that's why I
Yes,
said with growth hormone, not to take too much growth hormone because then you start getting the appetite increases. So it kind of defeats.
yes, you're right. Yes,
So you really have to really diagnose what your aim is from using semaglutide. And if you have appetite issues, you want to avoid anything that's going to stimulate appetite. So in that case, you might want to go
yeah,
back to GW. But if you're looking for something to kind of balance the loss of appetite with semaglutide, then it makes sense. When it comes to anabolic steroids, talk about some anabolic steroids that we can use. You can come on the forum and check out guys like Pigsy, Zenith. These are bodybuilders on the forum that use semaglutide. And these
yeah.
are guys on the forum that also Hypo Game is also another guy. Willipede is another
Void
guy.
Rage, I think him and his wife both are. I mean,
Yes,
he's
and
looking
they're
to
more
make weight
power
for a
lifters.
powerlifting competition, so that's his reason right there.
Yeah. So some of the steroids that were great for cutting specifically would be primobolan.
Yes,
Primobolan is
yes,
a one that you can run anywhere from 300 to 500 milligrams a week, along with the semaglutide. You can run some testosterone with it as well. I think it has the potential to be a really good steroid cycle. But you don't have to. You don't have to run steroids. You can run the
no,
semaglutide by
no, he
itself.
can run it on its own. Yeah,
But if you are someone who likes to cycle steroids and you want to throw in the semaglutide, it would be a good idea. I wonder if you should start the semaglutide first, Mobster, for like a month and then add the steroids to it, or if you should start the steroids first for like a month and then add the semaglutide. What do you think
Well,
about
look at
that?
what you just mentioned about Primo. I call Primo a muscle keeper. So when you're cutting, when you're dieting, when you're getting into shape, you lose a little bit of muscle sometimes when that happens. And Primo is a muscle keeper. So drugs like Primobolan in that particular example is a way of retaining the hard-earned muscle and at the same time using your body fat to get lean. That makes a lot of sense to me. So, for example, any of the cutters might work in that regard. Would I do one or the other? I would actually do semaglutide first, Steve. I say this purely and simply because I say to people, when you're looking to get into shape, when you're looking to cut, in this example, when you're looking to reduce body fat levels, this one of the easiest things to do pre-cycle is to start as you mean to go on, meaning fix your diet, increase your cardio. You're almost putting your body then normally without semaglutide into an anabolic state. It gets ready to grow muscle. It becomes more efficient at burning fat. So by having these things in place, uh, doing more daily steps, tightening your diet up, and then introduce the semaglutide, and then bring in something like, for example, Winstrol or other steroids that are used like pregabalin to retain muscle while you're cutting away. You can even arguably, if your diet is still effective, if your protein intake is still sufficient, you might even get into recomposition state. But definitely, I would say semaglutide, tighten your diet up, tighten your cardio up, then the semaglutide, then the steroid in that particular order. And of course, that means your diet is still on point, your training is still on point, and you've got the dose that you feel the most comfortable with of semaglutide. You've run it for a few weeks. You're already kind of feeling the effects. You know how it works. You know how you feel on it. You've got comfortable with that not being hungry and so on and so forth. And then introduce a steroid to retain muscle in the case of Primo. And the end result should be, all things considered, and again, come onto the forums and check it out for that reason, that you end up looking lean, ripped, fucking fabulous, and finally in shape with using a product like this. What do you think on that?
Yeah, and a lot of these guys like Pigsy, they use this. They use the semi-glutide on their contest prep, and it worked incredibly well for them. A lot of competitors, when they go into contest prep, they complain they feel like crap, their appetite. They
Yes,
just go low
yes.
carbs and blah blah blah. So semi-glutide helps them get through that tough stage of their contest prep. So in that aspect, it makes sense to save the semi-glutide till later when
Let me
you're
just
kind of.
refer to Pigsy again,
But I
Steve.
think
This man
most
is
I think most people though are not like Pigsy. I think most people should follow what you're saying, Mobster.
he's fucking superhuman, man. He's
Yeah, yeah. I
literally
think
just
most people
finished
should just
16-hour work days to the great big season, and he's ripped the fuck all the
yeah.
time. So yeah,
So I think
most
it
people
makes
wouldn't be
sense.
like that.
I think it
Oh
makes
god.
sense to follow what you said, to run a semaglutide first, see how you
Yes.
react to it, and then
Yes. Get
possibly
used
in
to
the
the side effects.
future, or add your steroid cycle to the back end. If you're
Yeah, I don't want to
cycling,
be manipulating the variables on cycle, Steve. I don't want to be manipulating the variables when I'm that much
well,
tired
I
or
think too,
training
and
gets
you
difficult.
don't want to get caught on semaglutide during PCT because then PCT it might not be in your best interest not to be eating during PCT. Then you're going to lose a lot of your gains in the process.
Yes,
So
exactly.
it makes sense to kind of play around with semaglutide maybe away from steroids and then add the steroids later on, and then this way you'll know how you react to it. But maybe not use the semaglutide while you're actually in PCT. So maybe start the semaglutide a month or two ahead of time, then run your steroid cycle 8 to 20 weeks while you're on a semaglutide, then come off the semaglutide and your PCT, and then see what happens from there.
Roid rage to me is a great example, Steve. He wants to lift in a weight category for the powerlifting competition he's about to do. He's actually breaking some pre-Rs right now. He's got probably the leanest he's been and the lowest body weight he's been for a while. And yet he just put up two PRs yesterday. And he's looking to break I believe, the age slash masters class record at 675 pounds on his deadlift by making weight for that class, for that age group, etc., etc., etc. And he's a big, strong motherfucker, normally 20, 30 pounds heavier than he is right now. And I believe he's down 20 or 30 pounds, and there's a few weeks to go. So he would be a great example.
Yeah.
Arguably, Pigsy's more of a freak in that regards. So strength, roid rage is more typical than for most of us. Carried a little bit of extra flesh, a little bit more body fat, but is maintaining and increasing his levels of strength. Will look more muscular than he has done before. I would not be surprised if he has a 4-pack or 6-pack on the platform. So he's more representative of our audience. And again, because you, the listener, are the kind of people that train already, that's why you listen to the show, you work out, you hit the gym, you're already doing some kind of cardio, and you kind of know a little bit, plus, of course, listening to these shows about your nutrition, and you're looking for an edge, because that for me is what semaglutide is. It doesn't replace good kitchen habits, good dietary habits, no training, etc. That's
And
if you're being treated by a doctor, that's a bit different. But yeah,
so one last important fact to keep in mind with semaglutide, it has a half-life of 7 days. So that's another reason why you really should be running it a minimum of really 4 to 5 weeks minimum, and really up to 8 weeks, because it's not going to reach peak in your system for at least a month. So just taking it one time and then that's it is not going to work. You got to keep taking it, and it's a slow release. So you'll start notice it peak after a month. So just taking it for 4 weeks, you're missing out on the peak benefits of it. And that's another reason too why you shouldn't be so quick to raise the dose.
yes.
Don't use it for like a week or two and be like, well, it's
Yeah,
not
because you
doing.
can't feel it working, you can't feel it working.
Yeah,
Boom, the dose goes crazy,
yeah.
and suddenly you're
But
absolutely happy.
it's gonna kick in as soon as you take
Yeah,
it, but it's not gonna
yeah,
reach peak for another
yes,
4 or 5 weeks. So you got to keep that in mind. So be a little patient with it. Those of you trying to lose weight, and do it the smart way. It's all about going in there
yes,
and
Steve.
just
Look,
putting
it
the work.
takes years to get out of shape. It shouldn't take 5 minutes to get into shape. In fact, I'd argue that if it did, you feel horrendously bad.
Yeah.
So it should
So
be a
so
gradual
one
process.
Yeah, so let me finish the podcast with this, and I'll let you have a final word, Mobster. Look, at the end of the day, if you're gonna take semaglutide, I recommend for the next month, eat healthy. So go in your pantry, go in your fridge, throw out all your junk food,
Yes,
okay? And start eating clean ahead of time. This way, when you use a semaglutide, you'll be better. Don't wait to use a semaglutide to start eating healthy, because then you're just going to use it as a crutch, and now you're never going to be able to eat healthy without it. So
yeah,
that would be my final tip to you. So it's very important to take advantage of it. Do your daily fasted cardio, eat good quality whole foods,
yes,
and try some fasting protocols as well, because the semaglutide is going to kill your appetite enough where you're going to not feel hungry the whole day. So you might as well just fast. Just fast the whole fucking day. Drink a lot of water and just fast. And if you want to eat, maybe eat one small meal. That's it. Remember, you're trying to lose weight here, and this is the way to do it. Go ahead, Mobster. Final word.
yeah. So my final thoughts in that regards, and I've said this on other shows, I think it applies here as well, Steve. You got the way, and then you have the optimal way, and the optimal way would be to follow the suggestions that we're giving you, because the results will be that much better if it was simply take a pill or simply take an injection and you lost some body fat. That would be great, right? But if you follow our protocol, you practice dietary habits that were good, you hit the gym, you went out and got your steps, you tried fasting cardio, like Steve said, you tried fasting, you gradually increase the dosages just to see how you feel. The fucking end results are going to be that much better, Steve. They absolutely will. We've said this tons of times when we talked about using trend, using this steroid, using that drug, etc., etc. Sometimes these drugs can be incredibly effective. But yeah, yeah, listen, but if you do it the way that we talked about, then there would be that much more so. So you would be even in better shape. The shape, arguably, Steve, of your life. I've seen some great examples. Listen, come to the forums, check out the logs that we've already described just to see other people's experiences. And if you do decide to use semaglutide, come onto the forums and share your experience. This is one of those opportunities for you to give back, as we said on another show, where the information that you provide about your journey and your success and the things that we've given you tips on this show and on the forums will help others 10 or 15 or 20 or even 100-fold, because thousands of people will read your experience, from hundreds at the beginning and thousands over time. Will see Joe came onto the forums, he got into shape, he used this, he ran it at this dose, and look at the great results that Joe had. You post up pictures, post up photographs of the scale, photographs of your food, and just the support you'll get will be unbelievable. The advice you get will be fucking priceless, Steve. And you will actually be helping other people, including yourself. And imagine if you got into shape for your family, your friends, for a holiday, whatever. The photographs at the beginning versus the photographs of you hitting the beach with a six pack. That would be fantastic. Let us know what you think. Please note, we are not doctors and the opinions are ours. It's our view based on our experience and views on the topic. Our podcast are for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.